I need to get this off my chest because I've been carrying it around for 5 years, and I think if I don't tell somebody, I'm going to lose it. Last Thursday, I sat in a conference room on the 14th floor of a building I own. Technically, my company owns it, but whatever. And I watched 3 people who used to make me feel like I was nothing sign paperwork that basically handed me control of everything they'd spent their lives building. And the wildest part? 2 of them were my cousins. The third was my uncle, and none of them, not one, recognized me until I stood up to shake hands at the end. I know that sounds like a movie. I swear it's not. Bear with me. Some background. I grew up in what people from the outside would call a successful family. My Uncle Rich owned a commercial property development company in the suburbs outside of Philadelphia, Whitmore Property Group. Not huge, but big enough. Maybe 40 employees at its peak. He started it in the 90s, and by the time I was a teenager, the whole family treated him like he was some kind of genius. My cousins Derek and Vanessa both worked there. Derek ran the leasing side. Vanessa handled operations and basically acted like she was COO, even though I don't think she ever had that title officially. Then there was me, Marcus. The charity case. My mom was Rich's younger sister. She had me at 19, never finished college, worked 2 jobs most of my life. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Norristown while the rest of the family was out in King of Prussia in these big colonials with the circular driveways. My mom never asked Rich for money, I know that for a fact, because she told me once, kind of drunk on Thanksgiving, that she'd rather work at Wawa for the rest of her life than give him the satisfaction. I didn't really understand what she meant by that until later. When I was 22, I just finished a business degree at a state school, nothing fancy, but I was proud of it. I couldn't find work for like 3 months after graduation. My mom, against everything she believed, called Uncle Rich and asked if he had anything for me, and he said yes. I should have known something was off from the start. Derek, who was maybe 27 at the time, made this joke on my first day. I was standing in the break room trying to figure out the Keurig. It was one of those commercial ones with like 40 buttons, and he walked in with Vanessa and said, loud enough for the 2 other people in there to hear, "Don't worry, we'll start you slow. Filing and coffee. The Marcus Lane." And Vanessa laughed. Not like a mean laugh exactly, more like she thought it was just obviously true. That was my introduction. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I keep thinking about that conference room last Thursday, watching Derek's face when he realized who I was. His mouth did this thing where it opened slightly and then closed, like he was going to say something but his brain shut it down. And I don't know. I thought I'd feel triumphant or something. I didn't. I felt kind of sick actually, but I'll get to that. For 3 years I worked at Whitmore, and I don't mean I worked there like I showed up and did the minimum. I worked. I learned everything. I was doing market analyses that Derek was putting his name on. I was finding tenants for properties that Vanessa was taking credit for filling. I reorganized their entire filing system. This was 2018, and they were still doing some stuff on actual paper, like physical folders in cabinets. I digitized everything. I built spreadsheets that tracked vacancy rates across every property. Nobody asked me to do any of that. I just did it because I thought eventually someone would notice. Nobody noticed. Or if they did, they didn't say anything. The thing that really got to me, and I know this sounds petty, but I need to say it was the family dinners. Rich hosted these big Sunday dinners at his house every couple weeks. And the whole time, everything was about Derek's latest deal or Vanessa's operational improvements, and I was just there, like a piece of furniture. My mom stopped coming after a while. She said it made her feel bad, and I told her I understood, but honestly, I was kind of hurt she left me there alone. There was this one dinner, I think it was April. No, wait, it was definitely March, because Vanessa's birthday is in March, and they'd just done a party for her at some restaurant in Conshohocken, the one on the river. I can't remember the name anyway. Rich was talking about expansion. He wanted to move into mixed-use development. More ambitious stuff. And I spoke up. I had this idea about converting old strip malls into residential commercial hybrids, which now everyone does, but back then it was still kind of novel in the suburban Philly market. I laid out the whole concept, demographics, zoning considerations, projected returns. I'd been working on it in my apartment for weeks, on my own time, on a laptop I bought refurbished from Best Buy. Rich listened, and then he said, I'll never forget this. He looked at Derek and said, "See, that's the kind of thinking we need more of. Write that up and bring it to me Monday." He said it to Derek. Not to me, to Derek, while I was sitting right there. And Derek said, "Yeah, I've actually been kicking around something similar. which was a lie. He hadn't. I didn't say anything. I just kept eating. My aunt had made this roast that was honestly way too dry, but everybody was acting like it was amazing, and I remember thinking that's basically how this whole family works. Everybody pretends everything is great when it's obviously not. Sorry, I know I'm rambling. The point is, sitting in that conference room last Thursday, I kept thinking about that dinner, that exact moment. Rich redirecting my idea to Derek like I was just background noise, because that's what set everything in motion. The humiliation that finally broke me happened at the company's 25th anniversary party. Summer 2019, Rich rented out this event space in Wayne. About 100 people, employees, clients, family, some local business people. Open bar, catered, the works. Rich gave a speech. He talked about the company's history, the team, the family legacy. He thanked Derek by name. He thanked Vanessa by name. He thanked his wife. He thanked his accountant, a guy named Phil, who I'm pretty sure was embezzling from him, but that's a whole other thing. He thanked the janitorial company. He did not mention me. But that's not the part that broke me. After the speech, I was standing near the bar I was drinking a Yuengling. I remember that clearly. And a client, this older guy who owned a bunch of retail properties, walked over and started talking to me about the strip mall conversion idea. He'd heard about it somehow. I started explaining my analysis, and I was mid-sentence when Derek walked up, put his hand on my shoulder, and said to the client, "Marcus does great work pulling together the research. He's our data guy. But the strategy side, that's more my area. Let me walk you through the real plan." He said it with a smile, like he was being kind, like he was rescuing me from embarrassing myself. The client looked at me with this expression that was basically pity, and Derek walked him away. I stood there holding my beer, and I could see Vanessa across the room. She'd been watching the whole thing. She just shrugged. Like, what did you expect? I gave my 2 weeks the next Monday. Rich didn't even try to counter. He said, "I think that's probably smart," and shook my hand, and that was it. 22 months of work, gone in a handshake. And here's the thing I kept coming back to in that conference room last Thursday. None of them thought about me again after I left. Not once. I was so irrelevant to them that I literally ceased to exist the moment I walked out of that building. Which, looking back, is probably what saved me. Because nobody was watching. The next part is going to sound like I'm bragging, and I promise I'm not. I'm just telling you what happened. I moved into a studio apartment in Lansdale. My mom helped with the deposit. I got a job at a property management company, small, maybe 12 employees. Boring work. But I was learning the landlord side of things, not just the development side. And I was still working on my strip mall conversion model every night after work. I started a blog. Yeah, a blog. In 2019. About suburban commercial real estate trends. Nobody read it for like 6 months. But I was building a body of work publicly available analysis that showed I actually knew what I was talking about. And then a guy from a regional investment fund found one of my posts and emailed me. Long story short, and I really am trying to keep this shorter than it's turning out by 2020, I had a consulting relationship with this fund. By 2021, I had 3. By mid-2022, I'd helped structure my first actual deal. A strip mall in Doylestown. Exactly the kind of conversion I'd pitched at that family dinner. It performed way above projections. The anchor tenant was a co-working space, and the residential units above were fully leased within 4 months. That deal got me noticed. I founded my own firm, called it Bridgeway Capital Partners. I know, very corporate, whatever. I didn't want my name on it. I didn't want anyone connecting it back to me, not yet. I'm not going to bore you with every deal because, honestly, most of them were boring. The point is that over the next 2 years, Bridgeway grew. We did 6 projects, then 12. We started acquiring distressed commercial properties across the Philly suburbs. I hired people who were actually good at their jobs. I built something that worked. And here's where it gets, I don't even know the right word for it. In early 2024, my acquisitions team brought me a portfolio. 7 commercial properties in the western suburbs. Strip malls, a small office park, a couple of standalone retail buildings. The portfolio was underperforming. The ownership group was over-leveraged and looking to sell. My team recommended we make an offer. The ownership group was Whitmore Property Group. I want to be really honest here. My first reaction wasn't some cold, calculated revenge thing. My stomach dropped. I literally put the report down and went to the bathroom and just stood there for like 5 minutes staring at the mirror above the sink. There was a water stain on the ceiling tile above me shaped like Florida. I remember that, which is such a weird thing to remember, but I do. I didn't have to do it. I could have passed. My team didn't know the connection. Nobody was making me. But I kept thinking about Derek's hand on my shoulder, and Rich saying, "That's probably smart," and Vanessa's shrug. So I authorized the acquisition. The due diligence took 2 months. During that time, I learned that Whitmore was in worse shape than I thought. They'd expanded too fast, ironically, into mixed-use development, the exact thing I'd suggested, and the execution was sloppy. They'd overbuilt in areas where the demand wasn't there. Derek had been making deals based on vibes, basically, not data. And Rich had let him, because Rich had always let him do whatever he wanted. When we made the offer, it was fair. I want to be clear about that. I didn't lowball them. The number was market appropriate. My lawyer, a woman named Janet, who has the warmest personality of anyone I've ever met but is absolutely ruthless in negotiations, she handled the initial conversations. She dealt with Whitmore's attorney for weeks. I never appeared. The closing was scheduled for last Thursday. That's when they found out. I walked into the conference room and Rich was already sitting there. He looked older than I remembered. Thinner. Derek was on his phone. Of course he was. Vanessa was reviewing documents with their lawyer. There was a box of those little individual coffee creamers on the table, the kind with the foil lids, and a plate of Danishes that nobody was eating. I hate Danishes. Janet introduced me as the managing partner of Bridgeway. Rich looked up. His face didn't change at first. I think it took him a few seconds. Then he said my name like a question. "Marcus?" I said, "Hey, Uncle Rich." The room got really quiet. Derek put his phone down. Vanessa just stared at me. And this is the part I keep replaying. I didn't feel the way I thought I would. I'd imagined this moment, honestly, probably hundreds of times. In my head, I was always cool and composed. Maybe I'd say something clever. Maybe I'd reference that anniversary party. Maybe I'd look at Derek and say something about being the data guy. I didn't do any of that. I just said, "Should we get started?" Because I didn't know what else to say. My hands were shaking, and I put them under the table so nobody would see. The signing took about 40 minutes. Nobody said much beyond what was necessary. At one point, Derek started to say something. "Marcus, I just want you to know," and Vanessa touched his arm, and he stopped. I don't know what he was going to say. Part of me wishes I'd let him finish. Part of me is glad I didn't. When it was over, I stood up to leave. Rich caught me at the door. He looked at me and said, "Your mother must be proud." And I don't know if he meant it sincerely or if it was a dig, because even now I can hear it both ways. I said yeah, and walked out and sat in my car in the parking garage for probably 20 minutes just breathing. I called my mom that night. She cried. I cried too, which I wasn't expecting. She kept saying, "I'm sorry, I made you go there in the first place." And I kept saying it was fine, and we were both kind. Of lying to each other, which is, I guess, how our family communicates. It's been a week. I own the properties now. Whitmore still operates them under a management agreement. I'm not a monster. I kept the staff employed, but the equity is mine. Derek and Vanessa still work there technically, though I've heard through my team that Derek has been exploring other opportunities, which means he's job hunting. I don't know what I expected to feel. Victory, maybe. Justice. That thing you see in movies where the music swells and you know the underdog won, and everything is right.
谢谢。
But it doesn't feel like that. It feels complicated and kind of heavy, and I keep going back and forth between thinking I did the right thing and wondering if I just became the same kind of person they were. Vanessa sent me an email yesterday. Just 3 lines. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't realize at the time how they treated me. She said she hoped I was doing well. I haven't responded yet. I've started typing a reply like 4 times, and I keep deleting it because I don't know what I want to say. Or maybe I don't know what I want to be true. My mom asked me if I feel free now. I told her, I think so. But honestly, I'm sitting here at midnight in an apartment that costs more per month than my mom makes in 2, and I still feel like the kid standing by the bar holding a Yuengling, watching his cousin walk away with his idea and his dignity. So, I don't know. Maybe you never stop being that kid. Maybe you just build enough around yourself that it doesn't matter anymore. Or maybe I'm just tired. I haven't slept well since Thursday. If you read all this, thanks. I don't even know what I'm looking for. I guess I just needed to say it out loud to someone who isn't my mom or my therapist.